All right, Julie, over to you.
Hi,
Hi everyone. Um,
hi everyone.
I would just like to introduce you to our second video into servitization. This one in particular is quite interesting as we'll be talking to Driton, which I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. Um, but today we're going to be he's going to be taking us through the framework for innovation and diagnostic. So if you're a consultant or you've worked with a myriad of tools with regards to changing business models and updating processes through an organization, you'll find this quite interesting. Now, over to you, Driton, if you'd like to
Thank
introduce
you.
yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. So, as you said, Driton is my name. Driton is usually English pronunciation, but the real pronunciation is Driton, Driton. I come from Kosovo and also Austria. And I will start with a small story. How did I come into this field, let's say? I was practitioner working in entertainment industry, theaters, parties, concerts, classical concerts, and then I started the MBA. And in the MBA, it was Kim Cassidy Harris professor. She is very known for service theater, and where she was speaking about service theater and services which connected with me as a entertainment and service theater. Again, fast forward, she introduced me to SIRPSIG conferences in 2008 in Liverpool, where I participated for the first time. And that was just exactly the time where I did the master MBA thesis in customer experience. And that's where I met this community. And then in 2010, I met Jim, who was talking about service science. And then I started thinking about frameworks, how this service science, how services could be used in practical world as I was coming from that point. And then I created this framework, which then I shopped around through universities for PhD. I get very positive response from most of them. I ended up in University of Glasgow with my supervisors, Robbie Payton, who has supported me a lot because he was also a lot into it, into service science and all that. And with one sentence, he said, okay, tell me what's about this framework. I said, I can guarantee that I can go into any company in the world and find the place where they can innovate. So that's the short version, although quite long. So I can present you in one way. Then I did a PhD from that. In the beginning was just in a micro level, and then due to the continuous evaluation of service dominant logic, moving also to the next level, institutional thinking and service ecosystem. And of course, service science did a lot in that time, papers they did together, Vargo and Jim together. So I kind of grew up and my framework grew up with all these papers. So I didn't do any something big invention. I connected them like a Lego. What Jim and community were presenting papers, I was just putting them where I thought there is a place. So this framework is actually co-created by all community, service community, I will call it, service dominant logic community, service science community, partly also consumer culture. Uh, and I was trying to make sense of them and where and how it fits. And always I had in my mind, how could I explain to someone who is practitioners? And as I was working into telecom company, I made a use of it like that. So I can start slowly. So actually, the first slide already did. So my
But
PhD was on, yeah.
before you start, I thought maybe, I asked a couple of questions because you
Yes, of
raised
course.
a couple of things that I thought were very interesting. So my background is in anthropology. So I've done a lot of
Mm,
cultural and corporate anthropology. I
Yeah,
thought it
well,
was really interesting, your choice of word. You said service theatre, and I'd love
yeah,
to hear what you mean by that. For example, in consulting, we do, I guess I'm more familiar with what we call orchestrating. Um,
yes,
and and that's why I found it so interesting, because when you think of orchestrating, you think, well, of an orchestra and music and
yeah.
bringing all these disparate people together. But you talked about service theatre, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, Julie, now you're touching the pain point or my lovely point because, as I said, I'm coming from entertainment industry. I did in Vienna classical concerts, and where we orchestrated, we had to orchestrate. So it's about orchestrating the touch points in between, in this case, in micro level between the user or consumer and the organization. And service theater, it's a concept that probably Fisk and Bittner and Groove, they did initial articles, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in 1990s. And then my supervisor in the MBA, Kim Cassidy, she kind of developed further. And as I said, when she was talking about that, I found it that for me, it was like, I can get that because I spent all my life in parties, events, and all that. And at the same time, I was in marketing at telecom. So, and we spoke earlier with Jim. I think the service blueprinting and service theater, it makes a lot of sense to get this transformation from goods dominant logic towards service dominant logic and service science. And that should be incremental. And incremental, like moving from goods dominant logic 7 piece service blueprinting and then service theater. So it should be as a theater the service that is offered. So it's 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, call it how you want, and that's where the orchestration of all interaction between actors starts. So it's not just one interaction between consumer and the firm, but there are many interactions, and not just between actors, but resources and all that. And that's how I transformed my paradigm shift. And that's how I try also to explain to people how to move. Because if you send them directly to ecosystem, institutional, cultural thing, it usually doesn't work. But if you walk them through step by step, usually it works. And that's how I did. Actually, that's how I understood. Maybe because I understood it that way, I moved this paradigm shift from goods dominant logic towards service dominant logic. I even, in my early years in 2012, I said to Wargo, which was very naive, maybe, I said, Professor Wargo, I think I can explain service dominant logic with my framework better than you. And he was like, okay, he said, I would be happy because with my SVISS work, which means strategic value innovation service systems or service science, service system science, I was trying to make sense of that, of all these schools and making sense and making it practical. So it's not just for me, but how can I explain to my colleagues in telecom, and also I'm in entrepreneurship. I had my coffee house chain, and I always use this framework to look at the offering like that. So from strategic value innovation service system, operational bridge, how to identify where the value is co-created, evaluated, in which level. So that's what SVISS is doing. And here I have the interesting graph. I hope it helps. On the left axis is individual. On the right, although here is not written, on the right is context or collective or structure. It depends from which lenses. We usually have this linear form, which is social practice. And that's a normal, let's say, normal theater play, if we want to use that. But once the interaction starts, then if we can translate this social practice into experience, personal experience, that's where the value is co-created and evaluated. So we need this like a heart EKG. I don't know, do you use in the English that, but you see these stars here, moment of capture where interaction happens. It's not just exchange of money for goods, but in every touch point we exchange some resources, no matter what. And these moments of truth, let's say, these moments of truth are where the normal practice gets to personal experience. And that's where in this journey, that's where customer or actor evaluates each step with other actors. Does he want to stay still in that interaction or not? And it's continuous co-creation and evaluation, because if it stopped to evaluate, he will drop out of the train, let's say. So this is a kind of one of the figures that it made an impact also in my PhD, because my PhD is conceptual. And when I did the PhD conceptual, in that time was a very big risk. Very big risk. Now every university is calling for PhD, conceptual PhD. So this is one interesting point or framework also that Jim also likes. I thank him a lot. And he is also a reason why I am so deep into it through his papers and connections. So the concept of value creation in 2010 was explained by Ferguson and by Gumeson and Melle paper, which is interaction of actors' resources in particular context create value. What I have added is that before it creates value, value emerges out of experiences or social practices. So interaction of actors' resources in particular context, they create first, it depends on which level, they create experience, they create social practices, they create service ecosystem, out of which value is co-created and evaluated. And that's from Holbrook again, Maurice Holbrook, which I looked at him a lot. And I liked his work a lot, who says that value derives from experiences. So we need first to have a particular experience out of which we evaluate or into which we co-create value and we evaluate. So individuals, it depends here, actors, as you can see, individuals, organization, institution in different level, interaction, central exchange, communication, and relationship through which value emerges. So value emerges out of this interaction, which we will see next slide in different levels. And context, environmental, cultural, which you probably as anthropologists are more interested, or how Giddens is, you can see it from Giddens' perspective, he calls it structure. So it's always in sociology, philosophy, and always, is it individual? Is it a collective? Is it context? Is it agency? Is it agency or structure? So in this case, I used context and resources into operand and operand resources. And here, now...
Could we go back to the previous slide? Because I've got a question for you as well.
Yeah.
This was one of the first slides that Jim shared with me, and I was super interested because it's the first time I'd seen it's very similar to a framework that I loved from IBM that I was exposed to, and I literally built my projects for the next 10 years based on that.
Okay.
And it's very similar to this, except instead of resources, what it had was velocity. And you've got here the fuel, and you need that fuel to build velocity, right? I thought it was this for me was I think it's very, very interesting. So how did you go about identifying all of these? Did you, because to me this is a model that you know, if you're in anything where you do value mapping, value organization, and you want to bring in, you know, your digital reinvention or digital transformation, you need to know all of these. But I find a lot of people in organizations aren't very familiar with these together. And you mentioned something really, really interesting, and you said experience drives value.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. So I said there is a definition in paper 2010 from Gummerson and Melle, Christina Melle and Evert Guvesson, late Evert Guvesson, where they describe interaction of actors' resources in particular context create value. And I like that definition a lot. Part that they didn't mention experience or social practice, while Holbrook, Maurice Holbrook, which I would probably call him father of value in marketing. He comes more from consumer behavior side, but it's amazing author, where he speaks about customer experience and that the value emerges out of experience. But this experience is created through this framework: interaction, actors, context, and resource. So that's how I came. As I said, this is the work. I don't know because it's everybody's work. I just put them together, and I created my own framework to make sense of that. So this framework: interaction, actors, context, and resources. These are 4 dimensions that create experiences, social practices, and service ecosystem networks, and out of which then value generates. So I just added into the definition of Gummerson and Melle, I added that prior to value, it has to be an experience for individual actor, or for meso actors, social practices, or macro actors, also social service ecosystem, which that's how I made these 2 definitions together, which I can show here if you don't mind, or you want me to stay in previous slide, but we can go back. And
oh, no. Yes.
Yeah. And here is, if you see layer 1 in micro level, so individual experiences. So how they are created. They are between 2 actors. There is interaction. If we go back to theater now, theater perspective, we exchange, consumer and company exchange the resources in particular context. It's different to exchange resources if we are in 30 degrees, where it's very hot, 30 degrees Celsius. Now I'm talking Celsius from Europe, to have a water, than to have when there's no water. And it's different if you are in 50 degrees and you don't need so much water. So context defines a lot what kind of experience we have. And out of that experiences, then we drive different types of value, which Holbrook calls them economic value, social value, status, playful, altruistic value, and so on and so on. 8 types. Amazing work from him. I never wanted to go to types of value because I said Holbrook has done. I will look at the types of value creation, because types of evaluation, Holbrook has done an amazing job, at least for me. So in the second layer, again, now here social practice and networks could be the second layer, which is collaborative resource integration among organizations and communities, which probably ISSIP could come in this level, where it tries to connect with network and social practices between consumer and how to innovate, or organization how to understand the service science, to take it as an example, and moving from micro to meso, and then from meso to macro level, which in macro level we have service ecosystem, and then probably comes your part as well, institution, and we have here cultural thinking, shift beliefs, norms, which are also, I treat them also as a resource, people's resource, because what kind of beliefs and norms you have, that's a kind of resources as well, but they are soft resources of the individual. So SVISS, what SVISS does is that this interaction of actors between actors' resources in particular context, it then thinks in three levels: micro, meso, and macro level, which I explained. And then I took an example, because having these lenses, Julie, that's the point. Once someone can look through lenses now from organizational point of view, can identify where value could be offered. As we say in service dominant logic, organization do not create value, they offer value proposition. Then they co-create together between actors, and then each of them evaluate. So with this framework, I believe organization can identify where value could be offered that they didn't see before. You know, like here, city cannot manage what they cannot see, because next will be some examples that I'm working in real life now. And looking in three levels, SVISS could be as diagnostic tool to see, here is possibility for value, here we can offer as organization, and here customer can create value. So invisible system gaps where a failure of context is missing, or resource integration destroys value before it can be evaluated, because they cannot see, they cannot offer, and ultimately value it's not even started, let alone created. So because they cannot see it. As such, I took here now with the scooters, I don't know, in Australia or all that, with this police, as you can see in this picture, we have this urban challenge with the fast scooters, and we are working in the project with the EU. We are going to offer that to EU, a micromobility crisis, vulnerable road users, which is how to apply SVISS to see this, where and how could be value created between three levels. The company, in this case, is entrepreneur, small, medium. Then it is individual who drives that, and then we have the city, because the vulnerable road users, which are bicycle riders, scooters, do you call them scooters? It is electric scooters, or do you have any other name?
Yeah, scooters works, but
Yeah.
the audio, your audio, Driton, is
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Now it's better. Yeah, it was
Yeah?
just a little off for a minute. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
But scooters is good.
Sorry. Yeah.
So one thing that's interesting about the scooters is that they rolled them out in many of Australian cities. They've now been banned from use because trips to ER multiplied, and I personally myself I had 3 or 4 very close calls. Thankfully, I didn't have an accident, because I love the idea of what they offered. They offered cheap mobility for people and very accessible. But at the same time, I think the idea was a little bit ahead of its time, because the city infrastructure and the laws weren't there. Like, we've had, God knows, over 200 years, maybe not so much as 200 years, but 150 years for the bicycle to be embedded. And it has had its successes, and And then once the automobile was introduced, it kind of took a back seat a little bit because then accidents started happening around
Yeah.
that. Um, but I love the way you've framed this up because I find because this is not selling to consumers and you're talking about smart cities and putting it in context, I think it's different. Like, I come from the resources sector and
Mhm.
that, there's no kind of consumer is further down. Like, if you're buying gold, for example, the customer doesn't really care how it's mined out. They're much further down the value chain when
Yeah.
they invest. But to actually get a mine to work, it's like a small smart city. So many pieces have to come together and work. And it's not as
Yeah.
easy as just setting up a website, getting a Shopify, and then trying to scale from there, right? You
Yeah.
have to have very experienced, highly focused expertise to make a city work. And it's the same in the resources sector. These are like things that they're foundational kind of industries or sectors, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's around rubbish removal, water safety, all of those things. And I think it's really important to the way you've framed it for me is like you need to have that intellectual rigor to continue making it to make it work, which is something
Yeah.
that I don't feel you need quite as much as if you're looking at consumer products, for example. You might need it in the high tech versions, but maybe not in retail so much. But I guess maybe I'm wrong because I look at it through because I'm not thinking through the logistics and everything else that goes into it, even with retail.
No, the point is that you mentioned also in Tirana, where I'm now, they banned them for the moment because many young people or youth, 13, 14, they use it and they are too advanced. And there is no regulation yet, like with motorcycles, you have helmets, because what I think scooters is something in between bicycle and motorcycles, so they don't know how to treat it. Is it a bicycle? No, it's much faster. Is it a motorcycle? Is no, it's not so fast. But they use also different roads from bicycle, from cars, and all that. So that's why. And then we have a lot of safety issues because once you have accident with them, they are quite fatal because they are not as slow as bicycle, and you are not protected very well. And that's why. And to be honest, this idea is mine because I drove that through Tirana. It's very crowded and city with traffic, and I said it's not like in bicycle where you can put the right hand and say I'm moving on the right, because if you go with scooter with one hand, you can have a big problem. Since we are at this, I can. And my son is he's training martial arts and he used these elbows in Taekwondo. And I had to buy him many times these elbows. And I said it would be good to have elbow here for while you drive for scooter, and then to have signals for going left and right. So that's why in interaction here, the total experience in this slide, standardized signaling and intuitive movement communication. This could be either you can have on your scooter or bike, where you can, or just with the movement, where you can show right or left. The difference between the signal guard and the helmet is that you prevent the accident, because with helmet is after you have the accident, you can, let's say, have less injuries. But here you can prevent because it's interaction inside the traffic between many actors, if we use our vocabulary here. So in this interaction, if one puts the signal guard in elbow, then could work. And here are resources now going through through the framework: high visibility LEDs, IMO sensors, integrated cameras. Of course, rider's confidence and spatial awareness, That's also resource, his cultural behavior, his beliefs, and all that. It has a lot to do. And here is where youth, 15, 16, or 13, they are maybe overconfident with scooters, and that's why they stopped in Tirana, because most of the accidents are very young people, and this could help then individual daily cyclist or e-scooter users, and then evaluation the rider subjectively experiences safe journey. You feel safer in your experience driving. Daily social practice becomes experience that you feel safer. Once you are safer, you feel confident. Once you are confident, you move in that way. So, and you avoid collusion and avoid real time. And that's now data between where in with fleets like Uber, Wolt. The most of the accidents are from fleets because they are 8-10 hours on the street, and this could a lot drop the accidents. So here, value evaluated as reduced corporate liability and enhanced occupational safety practices. Then insurance pays a lot. Insurance probably very interested in this. Value evaluated through risk-based incentives and establishment of collective community safety culture, and network, individual hardware data flow into collaborative institutional ecosystem. This is a meso level. And then we move to macro level, which will be city having a map, transforming individual user data into continuous city scale intelligence, and having continuous data where and how what is happening. Because through this safeguard equipment, it could be a lot of data. They could see where and how it's happening, why it's happening, can prevent, even can find a new solution. That's where SVISS would work as a diagnostic tool to see weak points and to adjust some traffic issues. So police, in this case, policymaker capture value by utilizing anonymized behavioral data into dynamically designed safer interaction. So this would probably make also during urban design or other designs in the city to through this data to have a better or less, let's say in these cases we are talking about traffic accidents, less traffic accidents. I think this was more about preventing. We have another thing here, again, from Pristina, again, it's that I'm working in. Save World Pristina. In Pristina, we have a big problem. So much parking is problematic that drivers put on the sidewalk. So there is no solution. So now we are thinking about here how to restore this in a micro and meso creation. Here on the right side, restore individual pedestrian safety here, and in the meso, enhancing community participation and inclusive mobility for vulnerable demographics. So on the left side is how it is now, how people park, and on the right side is how we want to do it. And this is a project that we are working in, and we want to apply for mobility funds. Here it is on a macro urban level, realigning the historic clash between vehicle mobility, management, and human-centric public space planning. Again, here public value evaluation, achieving verifiable, sustainable urban development, elevated institutional trust, establish scalable smart city, through in this 3 level, how to integrate data from all these 3 levels. That's these are fresh cases that the projects are already done, and we are just looking to apply, and where we use the SVISS. So here we have from isolated gadget to systematic infrastructure, from traditional product innovation to Swiss systemic innovation. So embedded statically in the physical product, as we already know, the goods dominant logic emerges dynamically through interaction, actors, resources, and context interaction. So from isolated strictly to the individual user scale, stacks interactively across micro, meso, and macro realities, data output, nano, in the traditional product innovation, while here continuous actionable ecosystem intelligence, which in a continuous way it develops. It doesn't stay static. It's very dynamic ecosystem, could be continuously renewed. Not could be, it is, it would be, it is. An ultimate outcome, a one-off solved unit in traditional product innovation, while here wearable urban mobility infrastructure. So here, last but not least, the insight, the true innovation does not occur by dropping new operant resources, gadgets, just to say I have that, but actually true systematic innovation requires architecting the entire engine of interaction in 3 levels. And that's where I think SVISS make a difference, because of course, one bicycle rider, e-scooter rider could think of the one gadget of the Sega, but can he see in 3 levels? One entrepreneur could identify that this would be a good idea to have a signal in the hand, but to think in 3 levels, I think we need service science, and those we need SVISS. So to make people think of that. Okay, so that would be it. I don't know. Did I manage to explain and to see how SVISS could be used? But to summarize, through interaction of actors in resources in different contexts, in different levels, one can identify where and how value could be offered, co-created and evaluated for each actor. That will be it. I thank you a lot. I am ready for any question and discussion, whatever is possible.
I think another key word you used, like at the beginning, you used the word theatre, and you ended it on architecture, the word architecture. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting because for the last 5 years, at least, there's been a lot of literature around how leadership is moving to being architect as leaders. With AI coming in now, we have to rethink, how systems are designed, how they're going to be propagated, these new systems through organization, what the impact will be. So I think it's a really another interesting concept of being the architect, because, as you talked, going through those levels, the micro, the meso, and the macro level, being able to think through that. You do need to think like an architect.
Yeah.
So how do you think organizations can, from your own experiences, whether it's in education or your previous, how do you nurture that capability to become an architect?
Actually, I lecture innovation and entrepreneurship class in master level, and I use SVISS up to micro level gradually, and where possible, I move forward. But this transition from goods dominant logic towards service dominant logic and the service science, this is very important here, how we move. It has to be incremental, because just talking suddenly for value creation in ecosystem for people who still think that I need to have a good product and that's it, it's not so easy to change the paradigm shift. So I go gradually, as I said in the beginning, through services marketing. I use customer experience, theater, and then gradually move towards the 4-dimension interaction, actors, context, and resources. And I use the service blueprinting in this 4D into service blueprinting and how the experience is created through these 4 dimensions. Once they understand that, then it's quite, then I can bring them to this slide, to this figure. Because once I explain that this is created through interaction, actors, resources, and context, then I'm able to say, okay, if you could move the normal daily practices of using an e-scooter, that's a normal practice, moving from school to home with the e-scooter. What do? I travel every day with that. Okay, so how can it become experience, personal experience? In this case, it's case of being more safety. Of course, other things as well, but the safety is issue. So the real customer experience for individual would be to have a safety. And then how this interaction could happen, because in the traffic, you are not alone. You cannot define safety alone in the traffic. So, but this is the transition, how I try to incrementally move them from goods dominant logic towards service marketing, towards customer experience, and how value emerges out of these experiences. But the normal daily practice need to be transformed to experience. Like you driving car every day. Okay, that's, if you say I'm driving car, that's a social practice. But me driving car in different way, it's how I experience it personally. And this is where organization needs to see how can that be transferred to personal experience. Now I was talking just about micro level. Once you explain that in micro level, then you try people to understand how value is created. So it's not anymore product, it's interaction, continuous co-creation, and continuous evaluation in every touch point. And then you can move to meso and say organization, industries, and all that, and macro level, like in this case, how can a city offer better urban design and better safety in between 3 levels? If that was the answer that to your question.
And I think we do have to wrap it up soon. We're gone over a little bit, and just so you know, the community watches videos when they're shorter, and as they get longer, we have this drop off in people watching, and I hope we get a good number of people watching this, because Driton, you've done an amazing job integrating so many things, and Julie, your questions really added a lot. So
yeah,
I thank you both
I want
for this opportunity today.
Thank you. No, thank you first, Jim, for making it interesting in 2010 when you mentioned service science. Without that discussion, without that interaction and exchanging your resources with me in Portugal 2010, in that particular contest, it would not be my personal experience of my life, not just at the moment, but we exchanged some resources, and your resources were so much valuable to me that it changed my life, and I decided to do a PhD. So thank you for catching up together again, for making for me opportunity to present. And I hope in any way that I can help to further develop service science.
Thank you. Thank you, Driton. Julie.
You're welcome. Thank you, Julie, a lot for your question, for interaction again, because your question were again interaction between actors. Thank you very much, Julie.
Oh no, thank you for putting this together. From when Jim showed me, I was like, oh, I definitely wanted to be here and have a discussion with you. And what I'd like to suggest is perhaps you know, we could get together again and just create a shorter version that's a little bit tighter, because I wanted to explore this with you as well.
That's a great idea.
But I would love to do that.
Yeah,
So
I'm ready anytime. I will try to come to Hawaii conference if possible. Let's see. I will apply for paper and let's see. But anytime, I'm very, very keen to it. Thank you very much.
And you're both on ISSIP Slack as well. So I will go
Yeah.
ahead and stop the recording now. And thank you both. And let's see. How do I do this?